The summer morning was calm in the quiet neighborhood. Birds sang, the streets looked clean, and most houses were still silent. Only one sound broke the calm, and that was the low growl of a Harley motorcycle being polished in the driveway of a brick house. The Harley belonged to a man named Ryan. He was not a flashy person, but he loved his bike with pride. To him, the Harley was not only a machine, it was a memory of his late father who had passed it down. Ryan took care of it like a treasure. Every weekend he cleaned the chrome parts until they shined and checked every detail before riding. Ryan was also a lawyer who worked closely with the state attorney. He was respected for his honesty and careful work. But while he was respected at work, his neighborhood had become a strange place to live. Most of the neighbors were polite and friendly, but there was one family that caused endless trouble: Karen and her teenage son, Dean. Karen was the type of neighbor who believed the street and the houses belonged to her. She was head of the HOA board, which gave her more reasons to act like the ruler of the neighborhood. She often made complaints about small things, like how long a trash bin stayed outside or how bright someone's porch light was at night. Many people avoided arguing with her, but Ryan never liked her attitude. Dean, her son, was spoiled and loud. He had no respect for others' property. Many times, neighbors had seen him trying to take things from other kids or damaging plants in front yards. Most people ignored it because they did not want to get into trouble with Karen, who defended her son no matter what he did. That morning, Dean's eyes fell on Ryan's Harley. He walked across the street while Ryan was polishing the tank. "Cool bike," Dean said, looking at it with greedy eyes. Ryan gave a polite nod. "Yes, it's a special bike." Dean stepped closer. "I want to ride it." "Give me the keys." Ryan looked at him calmly. "This is not a toy. It is my bike, and no one rides it except me." Dean frowned. "Come on. I can handle it. Just let me ride around the block." "No," Ryan said firmly. "It is not safe, and it does not belong to you." Dean's face turned red with anger. He stomped his foot on the driveway. "That's not fair. You should share it. Everyone in the neighborhood knows you're selfish." Ryan sighed. He stood and wiped his hands with a cloth. "Dean, go home. This is not something to argue about." Dean stormed off, shouting as he went, "I'll tell my mom." Ryan shook his head. He had seen this type of behavior before. He knew where Dean had learned it. Minutes later, Karen herself came marching down the street in her usual sharp tone. "Ryan, what did you say to my son?" Ryan stayed calm. "He asked for my Harley. I said no. It is my personal property." Karen crossed her arms and glared at him. "You live in this community, which means you must cooperate with the rules. My son only wanted to try it. Why are you being so difficult? Do you think you're better than everyone else because you work with the state attorney?" Ryan replied evenly, "This has nothing to do with my work. It is about respecting what belongs to others. No one has the right to demand something that is not theirs." Karen's voice grew louder. "I am head of the HOA. If I say you should allow neighbors to enjoy the bike, then you should follow that. Otherwise, maybe we need to check if your motorcycle even follows community guidelines." Ryan looked her in the eye. "You can call whatever meeting you want, but this Harley stays with me. I will not allow a child to risk his life on it." Karen looked furious, but she finally pulled her son back and walked away, muttering threats under her breath. Ryan returned to his work, but he knew this was not the end. When Karen felt insulted, she always tried to take revenge in one way or another. He tried to push the thought aside, as he had more important things to prepare for. That afternoon, he was scheduled to brief the state attorney on a case involving a fraud investigation. It was a serious matter, and he needed full focus. But as he covered the Harley with its black cover, Ryan could still hear Dean's angry voice and Karen's complaints echoing in his mind. He had a feeling that the situation with them would not stay small. Trouble was brewing, and it was only a matter of time before it reached him again. Inside his house, Ryan reviewed his notes for the meeting. He wanted everything ready, no mistakes. The files were arranged neatly, and his laptop was charged. Yet in the back of his mind, he worried that Karen and Dean would cause a scene at the wrong time. He reminded himself to stay calm and professional. The clock ticked toward noon. Outside, the street was quiet again, but an uneasy silence hung in the air. Ryan could sense that this was just the beginning of something bigger. The afternoon sun warmed the neighborhood, and Ryan prepared himself for the important briefing with the state attorney. He checked his suit, packed his files, and placed his laptop in the bag. His mind was focused on the meeting, but he could not ignore the uneasy feeling that Karen and Dean were not done with their demands. On the other side of the street, Karen sat with her son in their living room. Dean complained loudly. "Mom," he refused again. "He said I can't ride it. He thinks he's better than us." Karen, who always believed her son deserved whatever he wanted, felt her anger rise. "Don't worry, Dean. If he thinks he can embarrass us, he's mistaken. He may act calm, but I know how to make things difficult for him." Dean smirked. "You should make him give it to me. I want to ride that Harley. Everyone will look at me if I have it." Karen nodded. "Leave it to me. That man doesn't understand that in this community, we share. He wants to keep it only for himself. I'll show him he cannot ignore my authority." While she planned her next move, Ryan drove downtown to the courthouse. His Harley stayed safe under its cover in the driveway. The ride to the city was peaceful, and by the time he reached the courthouse, his focus had shifted to the case. He greeted the state attorney and began the briefing. Inside the conference room, Ryan spoke with clarity and confidence. He explained the fraud evidence step by step, presenting documents, charts, and witness statements. The state attorney listened carefully, asking questions now and then. Ryan answered each one calmly. It was an important moment, and he handled it with skill. Back in the neighborhood, Karen's plan was already forming. She gathered 2 members of the HOA and told them her version of the morning's incident. She claimed that Ryan had shouted at her son and refused to cooperate with community rules. She twisted the story, painting herself and Dean as the victims. One of the members asked, "But isn't the Harley his property? He has the right to refuse." Karen waved her hand dismissively. "Rules are rules. If a neighbor is not willing to share or at least show some kindness, then what is the point of living in a community? I will take this to the next level if I must." Dean sat beside her, pretending to look sad, though inside he was excited. He liked when his mother fought his battles. Evening came, and Ryan returned from his meeting feeling satisfied. The briefing had gone well, and the state attorney had praised his preparation. He parked his car and walked up to his house, relieved to be back. He uncovered his Harley for a short ride to clear his mind. But just as he checked the fuel, he noticed Karen walking toward him again. This time, she had a determined look on her face. "Ryan," she began in her usual commanding voice, "I have spoken with other members of the HOA. We all agree you are not acting like a good neighbor. My son has been humiliated. You cannot continue this behavior." Ryan stayed calm. "Karen, your son demanded something that is not his. I refused politely. There is nothing more to say." Karen raised her chin. "If you refuse again, I will report this. And I don't mean just to the HOA. I will call the authorities." "Do you want that kind of trouble?" Ryan was surprised by her words. "You want to call the police because I refuse to give my motorcycle to your son? That is not only unreasonable, it is false." Karen stepped closer. "Unreasonable? We'll see what the officers think when I tell them how you shouted at my boy and threatened him. They will listen to me. I am respected here. Ryan looked at her steadily. Karen, I did no such thing. I have never raised my voice to you or your son. If you decide to call the police, you will only embarrass yourself. I suggest you think carefully. Dean, who had been hiding behind his mother, shouted, "You're lying. You scared me. You told me never to come near your bike again." Ryan shook his head. "I told you to respect what is not yours. That is all." Karen pulled her son back and glared. "You will regret this, Ryan. You may be important in your office, but here, you will not win." With that, she turned and walked away. That night, Ryan sat at his desk, going over his notes again, but his thoughts kept returning to Karen's threat. He had faced tough cases in the courtroom, but this situation felt different. It was personal, and it was happening in his own neighborhood. As he closed his laptop, he told himself to stay calm. He had done nothing wrong, and truth was on his side. Still, he knew Karen well enough to understand she would not let go easily. He expected her next move would come soon. And he was right. Because the very next morning, while he was preparing to leave for another meeting, the sound of sirens echoed down the street. Police cars stopped right outside his house. Neighbors stepped out of their homes, whispering to one another. All eyes turned to Ryan's driveway, where his Harley stood shining in the sun. Karen and Dean appeared from their house, standing proudly at the end of the street. Karen folded her arms and watched as two officers approached Ryan. The trouble had begun. The morning air felt heavy as the police cars stopped in front of Ryan's house. The sound of doors opening and radios buzzing filled the street. Neighbors gathered quietly on their porches, curious to see what was happening. Some whispered to one another, while others simply stared at the scene with wide eyes. Ryan stepped outside calmly, his briefcase in one hand. He looked professional, dressed in a neat suit, ready for his day at the courthouse. His Harley shone under the sunlight, untouched and spotless. Two officers approached him. One was tall and serious, the other slightly younger but alert. The older officer spoke first. "Sir, we received a call from a resident. There's been a report of threats and harassment involving you and a minor." Ryan raised his eyebrows but kept his voice steady. "Officers, I can assure you, no such thing has happened. I have never threatened anyone, least of all a minor." The younger officer glanced at the Harley. "The call said this was about the motorcycle. Is that correct?" Before Ryan could reply, Karen walked toward them, pulling Dean along. She had a dramatic expression, as if she were in a play. Dean lowered his head, pretending to look scared. "There he is," Karen said loudly so all the neighbors could hear. "That's the man who shouted at my son and scared him yesterday. My boy only asked politely to sit on the motorcycle, and this man lost his temper. He told Dean never to come near it again. We felt threatened in our own neighborhood." Gasps and murmurs rose from the neighbors. Some shook their heads in disbelief, while others frowned, unsure what to think. Ryan met the officer's eyes. "Officers, that is not true. Her son demanded the keys to my Harley. I refused. I never shouted, I never threatened. I simply said no. This is my property, and I will not let anyone ride it. That was all." Karen quickly interrupted. "He is twisting the story. You see how calm he sounds now, but yesterday he was not like this. My son was terrified. Look at him." She pushed Dean forward, who faked a sniffle and wiped his eyes. The older officer looked at Dean. "Son, did this man threaten you?" Dean nodded quickly. "Yes, he scared me. He said I should never touch his bike or else." Ryan's jaw tightened, but he kept his tone respectful. "Officers, this is a false claim. I know the law, and I respect it. I work with the state attorney's office. I do not use threats, and I will not allow lies to damage my name. The younger officer took out a small notebook. Do you have any witnesses? Ryan thought for a moment. Several neighbors saw Dean demanding the bike. They can confirm I did not shout or threaten. Karen scoffed loudly. Of course he'll say that. He'll try to pull others into his story. But the truth is clear. My son is a victim. This is about safety in our community. What if tomorrow he loses his temper again? What if someone gets hurt? The tension in the street grew. Some neighbors looked uncomfortable. A few even stepped back, not wanting to get involved. The older officer held up his hand. All right, we need to keep this orderly. Sir, we understand you deny the claim. Ma'am, you're saying your son was threatened. For now, we need to make a report. Ryan nodded. I will cooperate fully. But I also request that this report includes my statement and the fact that this motorcycle is my private property. There is no law that allows someone to demand it from me. The officers exchanged a look, then began taking notes. Karen crossed her arms, satisfied that things were going her way. She whispered to Dean, "Don't worry. He won't get away with this." But Ryan stood tall. He was used to pressure. In the courtroom, he had faced louder voices and sharper accusations. He knew the truth mattered, even if it took time to show. After writing down details, the older officer said, "We will file this as a neighborhood dispute for now. If further action is needed, we'll inform both parties. For the moment, I suggest keeping distance and avoiding more arguments." Karen looked unhappy with that answer, but she forced a smile. "Thank you, officers. I trust you will handle this properly. We don't want dangerous people living here." Ryan finally spoke directly to her. "Karen, I have done nothing wrong. I will not give in to lies. If you continue this, I will take proper legal steps. Remember, the truth always comes out." The officers returned to their car, and slowly the neighbors went back inside. The street grew quiet again, but the air still felt tense. Ryan covered his Harley once more and locked it carefully. He thought about the upcoming day, the cases he had to work on, and the unnecessary trouble Karen was causing. She had crossed a line by involving the police. Inside his house, he sat at the table and opened his laptop. He typed notes about the incident, making a clear record of what had happened. He also noted the names of neighbors who had been present. His training as a lawyer taught him to always keep evidence. As he worked, his phone buzzed. It was a message from a colleague at the courthouse. The state attorney wanted him to return in the afternoon for an update. Ryan closed his eyes for a moment. He knew the timing could not be worse. Karen had just started a storm in the neighborhood, and now he had to remain focused for a serious legal meeting. He whispered to himself, "Stay calm. Handle one battle at a time." But in the back of his mind, he knew Karen would not stop. She believed she had power, and she would keep pushing until she got her way. The real fight was only beginning. The sun was high when Ryan returned to the courthouse for his afternoon meeting. He carried his files neatly under his arm, trying to keep his mind clear. The morning's event with the police still echoed in his thoughts, but he pushed it aside. The state attorney expected his full attention, and he could not allow personal matters to distract him. Inside the courthouse, he sat across from the state attorney and explained the latest updates on the fraud case. His voice was calm, his points sharp, and every detail matched the documents he provided. The state attorney nodded, impressed again by his professionalism. "You're handling this very well, Ryan," the attorney said. "Your preparation makes things easier for the entire office." "Thank you, sir," Ryan replied. "I just want the facts to be clear. That is always the strongest defense against confusion." The meeting ended smoothly, and Ryan felt a sense of relief. But as he drove back into his neighborhood, that relief began to fade. Two HOA members were standing with Karen in front of her house, their arms folded. Dean sat on the porch steps, smirking as if waiting for a show. Karen saw Ryan's car and immediately raised her voice so everyone nearby could hear. There he is, the man who thinks he is above community rules. Ryan parked calmly and stepped out, but he knew she was staging another scene. One of the HOA members, an older man named Mr. Lewis, spoke. Ryan, we've received complaints. Karen says you are uncooperative and aggressive. We need to address this. Ryan met his eyes respectfully. Mr. Lewis, you know me. I have lived here for years. I have never been aggressive toward anyone. This is about my motorcycle. Karen's son demanded to ride it, and I said no. That is all. Karen quickly interrupted. You're lying again. My son only wanted to sit on it. You scared him. This community is supposed to be friendly, but you bring hostility. If you can't follow our standards, then maybe this is not the right place for you. Dean grinned, enjoying his mother's performance. Ryan kept his voice calm. Karen, stop twisting the truth. Respect for personal property is not hostility. It is basic law. I have every right to say no. If your son wants to sit on a motorcycle, you can buy one for him. But this Harley is mine. Some neighbors who were watching from their porches nodded quietly, but no one spoke aloud. People had learned that disagreeing with Karen usually brought endless arguments. Karen turned to the HOA members. You see? He doesn't care about community spirit. He thinks only about himself. I already called the police once, and I'll do it again if I must. This man cannot continue like this. Ryan looked directly at the HOA board. You may file as many complaints as you like, but remember, the truth will stand. I work with the law every day. If needed, I will bring evidence and witnesses. I will not allow false reports to stain my name. Mr. Lewis shifted uncomfortably. He respected Ryan and knew his character, but Karen was relentless, and she held influence in the HOA. The second member, a woman named Clara, spoke softly. Maybe we should wait before making decisions. This seems like a personal disagreement more than a community issue. Karen's eyes flashed. So we do nothing? We let him disrespect us. Clara raised her hand. Karen, enough. We will review this later. This is not the right time to fight in the street. Karen looked furious, but she forced a tight smile. Fine. But don't think this is over. She pulled Dean inside, slamming the door behind her. The HOA members left quietly, leaving Ryan standing by his Harley. The street grew silent again. Ryan exhaled slowly. He knew Karen was not finished. She had failed to get the HOA to take immediate action, so her next move would likely be more dramatic. He locked his Harley and went inside, determined not to let anger control him. That evening, he received a call from his colleague at the courthouse. Ryan, I heard something strange. Someone called the office asking about you. They claimed you were being investigated for threatening a minor. Do you know anything about this? Ryan closed his eyes. He did not need to guess who it was. Yes. My neighbor, Karen, is making false claims. She already called the police once. Now she is trying to damage my reputation at work. His colleague sounded concerned. Be careful. Even if it is false, such rumors can spread quickly. But don't worry, those of us who know you will not believe it. Ryan thanked him, but the weight in his chest grew heavier. Karen was not only attacking him in the neighborhood, she was trying to follow him into his professional life. The night was quiet, but sleep did not come easily. Ryan sat by his window, looking at the Harley under the porch light. He thought of his father, who had once told him, a man must protect what is his, but he must also protect his name. Those words gave him strength. He decided to gather evidence. Tomorrow, he would speak to neighbors who had witnessed the arguments. He would write down every detail and prepare a record, just as he did in his legal cases. If Karen wanted a battle, he would not fight with anger. He would fight with truth. The next morning, Ryan stepped outside with his notebook in hand. He greeted Mr. Lewis, who was watering his plants. "Mr. Lewis," Ryan said politely, "you saw what happened. Would you be willing to confirm that I never shouted or threatened?" Mr. Lewis nodded slowly. "Yes, Ryan. I know you are not that kind of man. If this goes further, I'll speak honestly." That gave Ryan a spark of hope. Maybe not all neighbors feared Karen. Maybe some would stand with him. Still, he knew one thing for certain: Karen would not stop until she felt she had won. And the next move she made would be bigger than before. The new day began with a calm breeze, but tension still hung over the neighborhood. Ryan stood by his Harley, carefully tightening the bolts on the handlebar. He worked with steady hands, though his mind was alert. He knew Karen would not stay quiet for long. She had already tried the police and the HOA, and now she was spreading rumors about him at his workplace. Ryan reminded himself not to panic. He was a lawyer. He had handled worse accusations in the courtroom, where lies tried to hide the truth. He would face this with the same patience and strength. While he was polishing the chrome, his phone rang. It was Clara, one of the HOA members who had been present the day before. "Ryan," she said softly, "I wanted to tell you something. After you left last night, Karen came to my house. She was upset. She said she will do whatever it takes to remove you from the community. I thought you should know." Ryan thanked her. "I appreciate your honesty, Clara. She is trying to use her influence, but I will not allow false claims to win. The law protects fairness." Clara sighed. "Be careful. She is stubborn, and she has a way of convincing people. But I know the truth, and I will not let lies change my mind." Her words gave him some comfort. Later that morning, Ryan dressed again for the courthouse. He placed his files in the briefcase and locked his door. As he walked toward his car, he noticed Karen and Dean standing on their porch. Both of them were watching him closely. Karen spoke loudly enough for him to hear. "Go ahead, run to your job," she said with a mocking smile. "It won't save you. The truth will come out, and everyone will see what kind of man you are." Ryan did not respond. He simply got into his car and drove away. He believed silence was better than feeding her drama. At the courthouse, the state attorney called him into the office again. "Ryan, I've been hearing things," the attorney said seriously. "Someone has been making calls about you, saying you threatened a child. Normally I would dismiss such talk, but because of your position here, I need to ask directly what is going on." Ryan spoke clearly. "Sir, it is a false accusation. My neighbor's son demanded my motorcycle. I refused. Since then, his mother has twisted the story to make me look like a threat. She even called the police, but no charges were made because I did nothing wrong." The state attorney studied him for a moment, then leaned back in the chair. "I believe you, Ryan. You have always shown integrity. Still, you should handle this carefully. Document everything. If it escalates, you may need to file your own complaint." "I understand," Ryan said. "I've already started keeping records." The attorney nodded. "Good. Protect yourself, and let me know if this grows larger. Don't let it distract you from your cases." When Ryan returned home later in the day, he found police cars once again parked on the street. His heart sank. Neighbors had already gathered, whispering in groups. This time, 2 different officers were speaking to Karen in front of her house. Dean stood proudly beside her, as though he was the star of the show. Ryan parked and stepped out calmly, though he could feel everyone's eyes on him. One officer turned toward him. "Sir, please step over here. We need to talk." Ryan approached, standing tall. "What is the complaint this time?" Karen pointed at him with dramatic force. "This man is dangerous. My son told me he heard him say last night that he would take action if we came near his bike again. He is making threats in this neighborhood. I will not live in fear." The officer looked at Ryan. "Is this true?" Ryan shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not. I have said the same thing from the beginning. This motorcycle is mine, and I will not let anyone ride it. That is my only statement. I have never threatened anyone." Karen's voice grew sharper. "You see how smooth he sounds? He always hides behind his job. He thinks being a lawyer makes him untouchable." The officer wrote notes on his pad. "We will include your statement, ma'am. But sir," he turned to Ryan, "do you have any witnesses who can confirm your side?" Ryan nodded. "Yes. Mr. Lewis and Clara were both present when her son demanded the bike. They know I never raised my voice. They will confirm the truth." Just then, Mr. Lewis himself stepped forward from his yard. His voice was steady. "Officers, I heard everything." Ryan refused firmly but never threatened. "Karen is exaggerating. This is not the first time she has caused trouble." Clara also walked up, her face calm. "I was there as well." Ryan spoke respectfully. "It is wrong to accuse him of aggression." The officers listened carefully and wrote down their statements. Karen's face turned red. She looked at her son, then back at the neighbors who had spoken. For once, she seemed to realize not everyone supported her story. One officer closed his notebook. "For now, we see no evidence of a crime. This is a civil matter between neighbors. If either side wishes to take it further, you may file a report in court. But at this moment, we will not proceed with charges." Karen gasped. "So you will do nothing? My son is scared every day, and you call it nothing." The officer replied firmly. "Ma'am, fear is not proof. We need evidence. Until then, this case is closed." With that, the police returned to their car and drove away. The neighbors slowly went back inside, though a few whispered about how Karen had been challenged. Ryan turned to Mr. Lewis and Clara. "Thank you. Your support means a lot. Without you, her lies could have spread further." Mr. Lewis nodded. "You don't owe us thanks. You're a good man, and we all know it." Clara smiled kindly. "Don't let her break your spirit. She wants attention. You have truth." Ryan covered his Harley again and went inside. For the first time in days, he felt a small victory. But deep inside, he knew Karen would not accept defeat so easily. She was a woman who always wanted the last word. And that meant the storm was not over yet. The evening after the second police visit was strangely quiet. Ryan sat in his study, the warm desk lamp glowing over his files. Though he had handled the situation calmly, he knew Karen would not stop. Her pride would not allow her to accept defeat. As he made notes about the day's events, his phone buzzed with a new message. It was from an unknown number. The text read, "You will regret this. Give up the bike, or things will get worse." Ryan frowned but did not panic. He suspected who had sent it. He immediately saved the message, took a screenshot, and emailed it to himself as evidence. Years of legal work had trained him to document everything. The next morning, he stepped outside to check on his Harley. The black cover was still in place, the chrome still shining beneath. He unlocked it and ran his hand along the seat. The bike felt safe for now, but he knew the threat was real. Across the street, Karen stood on her porch, speaking loudly into her phone so neighbors could hear. "Yes, officer, I will be visiting the station myself. This man is not safe. I have proof he's intimidating my family. Dean grinned beside her, tossing a small ball in his hands. He looked at Ryan with mischief in his eyes. Ryan ignored them and went about his morning. He dressed in his suit, prepared his files, and left for work. Later that day, while he was in the courthouse library, Clara called him in a worried voice. "Ryan, something has happened. Karen went around knocking on doors this morning. She is collecting signatures to file a complaint against you with the HOA. She says you are unfit to live in the neighborhood." Ryan closed his book and took a deep breath. "Thank you, Clara." "Did many people agree?" "Some signed out of fear," Clara admitted. "But not everyone. Mr. Lewis refused, and so did I. Still, she is gathering support." Ryan nodded to himself. This was not just about a motorcycle anymore. It was about his character and reputation. Karen was trying to paint him as a villain, hoping the pressure would force him to give in. That evening, he attended the HOA meeting at the community hall. Karen stood at the front with a stack of papers, Dean beside her. Several neighbors sat in chairs, whispering quietly. Karen began her speech with dramatic energy. "We all moved here for peace and harmony. But one man has disturbed that peace. He refuses to cooperate, he refuses to respect us, and he threatens children. Is this what we want in our community?" Dean put on a sad face, lowering his head. Ryan stood calmly, waiting for his turn. When Karen finished, he stepped forward. His voice was steady, not loud but clear. "I respect this community. I respect each one of you. But I will not accept lies. This is not about harmony. This is about control. Karen's son demanded my motorcycle. I refused. That is all. Since then, false claims have been made, police have been called, and now my reputation is under attack." He paused, letting his words sink in. Then he held up a folder. "I have kept records. Every false call, every message, every witness statement. If this continues, I will take this matter to court. And I assure you, the truth will stand." Clara spoke up from her seat. "I was there. Ryan never threatened anyone. He spoke firmly but politely. These claims are false." Mr. Lewis added, "I confirm that as well. We should not allow one person's anger to divide the whole community." A wave of murmurs spread through the room. Some neighbors who had signed Karen's paper now looked uncertain. Karen's face turned red. "So you all take his side? You believe him over me? Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you when something happens." She stormed out with Dean, leaving the papers behind. Ryan remained standing. "I want only peace. I will not be bullied. This Harley is my father's gift. It is not for anyone else. I will protect it, and I will protect my name." The meeting ended without action, but Ryan knew Karen was not finished. Still, for the first time, he felt the tide turning. Neighbors were beginning to see the truth. That night, as he sat by the window watching the Harley, he whispered to himself, "The truth is stronger than lies." But deep down, he also knew Karen's pride would push her to try one last move. And he had to be ready for it. Part 7. The final test came sooner than Ryan expected. The next morning, while he was preparing for court, a loud knock shook his front door. He opened it to find two officers standing there once again. "Sir," one officer said, "we received a report of stolen property. Your neighbor claims this motorcycle does not belong to you." For a moment, Ryan was silent. Then he gave a short laugh of disbelief. "Stolen property? That motorcycle has been in my family for years. I have every document proving ownership." Karen appeared behind the officers, pointing at the Harley. "That bike is not his. He brought it here without registration. It's illegal. I demand you take action now." The officers turned to Ryan. "Sir, may we see the papers?" "Of course," Ryan said calmly. He went inside and returned with a folder. Inside were the title documents, registration papers, and even an old photograph of his father standing beside the Harley. The officers reviewed the documents carefully. Everything was in order. One officer looked at Karen and said firmly, "Ma'am, this bike is legally his. You should be careful about making false reports." Karen's mouth opened, but no words came. For the first time, she seemed shaken. Dean looked away, embarrassed. Ryan spoke gently but firmly. "Officers, I thank you for your time. Please note in your report that this was a false claim. I will be filing my own complaint for harassment." The officers nodded. "That would be wise, sir." When they left, several neighbors who had been watching applauded quietly. Clara walked over and said, "You handled that perfectly. She cannot fight the truth anymore." Mr. Lewis added, "It's over, Ryan. People see her behavior clearly now. She has lost their trust." Karen stood frozen for a moment, then turned and hurried back to her house without another word. Later that week, Ryan filed an official complaint for harassment, including every record he had kept, messages, witness statements, and false reports. The state attorney supported him, making it clear that such behavior could not be tolerated. At the next HOA meeting, Karen was removed from her position as head of the board. She sat in silence while the decision was announced. Neighbors who once feared her no longer gave her power. Dean sat quietly, no longer boasting about the Harley. Ryan spoke at the end of the meeting. "I want peace for this community. I hold no anger, but I will not allow lies to rule over truth. This Harley is a memory of my father, and I will protect it with respect. Let us live as good neighbors, not as enemies." The room filled with nods and quiet agreement. As days passed, the neighborhood returned to calm. Karen kept to herself, and Dean no longer came near the Harley. Ryan continued his work at the courthouse, respected more than ever. His colleagues admired how he had handled the matter with patience and dignity. One evening, he uncovered the Harley, started the engine, and rode down the open road. The wind brushed against his face, carrying away the weight of the past weeks. He felt free again, not only because the lies had been defeated, but because he had chosen the path of truth over anger. The neighbors who saw him ride by smiled and waved. For them, the sound of the Harley was no longer a cause of trouble but a symbol of justice and strength. And as the bike roared down the horizon, Ryan carried his father's words in his heart: "Protect what is yours, and protect your name." In the end, he had done both. The days after the last HOA meeting were calm, but everyone in the neighborhood knew the storm was not fully gone. Karen stayed quiet, yet her silence felt heavy, like a cloud waiting to burst. Dean no longer lingered around Ryan's Harley, but his eyes still held a spark of frustration whenever he looked across the street. Ryan, however, felt lighter. He had faced every trick, every false claim, and every whisper with patience. Still, he remained alert. He knew Karen well enough to expect one final move. That move came one bright morning. Ryan had just returned from court when a sharp knock echoed through his house. At the door stood two officers once again. Their expressions were serious, but not hostile. "Mr. Ryan," one officer said, "we received another report. Your neighbor has accused you of keeping stolen property. She claims the motorcycle in your driveway is not yours." For a second, Ryan almost laughed. The claim was so desperate it felt unreal. But instead of anger, he showed calm strength. "Officers, thank you for informing me. Please come inside. I will show you the papers at once." He brought out a folder he had prepared long ago. Inside were the registration documents, insurance papers, and even an old photograph of his father standing proudly beside the Harley. The officers studied the documents carefully. "Everything is valid," one officer said at last. He turned to Karen, who had been waiting near the sidewalk with her arms folded. "Ma'am, this motorcycle belongs to him legally. False reports can have consequences. I suggest you stop wasting police time." The words fell heavy on Karen. Her face lost its usual confidence. For the first time, she had no reply. Dean looked embarrassed and shuffled his feet, avoiding everyone's eyes. Ryan spoke firmly but without anger. "Officers, I appreciate your fairness. I have documented every false report. I will be filing a formal complaint for harassment. This must stop now." The officers nodded in agreement before leaving. As soon as the police cars drove away, neighbors who had been watching from porches began to whisper. Clara crossed the street with a relieved smile. "It's over, Ryan. Everyone can see the truth now. She cannot twist things anymore." Mr. Lewis added, "You stood strong without losing your dignity. That is rare these days. People respect you for it." Karen, red-faced and silent, hurried back into her house. The slam of her door marked the end of her fight. In the days that followed, Ryan took the final step. He submitted his complaint with all the evidence he had collected: every text message, every witness account, and every false police call. The state attorney supported him, and the HOA board was forced to take action. At the next community meeting, the decision was announced. Karen was removed as head of the HOA. The room was filled with quiet nods, some approving, others simply relieved. Karen sat in the corner, her usual fire gone, while Dean looked down at the floor. When the meeting ended, Ryan stood up to speak. His voice carried not pride, but sincerity. "I never wanted conflict. I wanted only peace and respect. But peace is not built on lies. This Harley is more than a machine. It is a memory of my father, a part of my life that cannot be stolen or replaced. I thank those who stood with the truth. Let us now move forward as neighbors, not enemies." The room grew warm with quiet applause. For the first time in weeks, the community felt united again. Life slowly returned to normal. Karen kept to herself, avoiding unnecessary words with anyone. Dean no longer made bold demands or showed interest in the Harley. He began spending more time with his friends away from the neighborhood. Ryan continued his work at the courthouse with greater respect from his colleagues. His neighbors often greeted him warmly, seeing him as a man who had defended his name with dignity rather than anger. One evening, the sky burned orange with sunset. Ryan stepped outside, uncovered the Harley, and started the engine. The sound was deep and steady, no longer a symbol of dispute but of strength. As he rode down the road, the wind brushing against him, he felt truly free. Clara and Mr. Lewis waved as he passed, smiling with relief. To them, the Harley was no longer a cause of trouble. It had become a symbol of justice, of standing firm when lies tried to take control. As Ryan rode further down the open road, he thought of his father's words. "Protect what is yours, and protect your name." He had done both, and in doing so, he had restored peace not only for himself but for the whole neighborhood. The Harley roared forward into the horizon, carrying him away from shadows of conflict and into the calm strength of truth. And for the first time in many weeks, Ryan smiled with pure peace, knowing the battle was finished, and he had won without ever losing his honor.